I walked up to the fancy hotel doors wearing my best purple dress. The one with tiny flowers that my husband bought me before he died. My heart was beating fast because today was my son Tommy's wedding day. I had been looking forward to this for months. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Rebecca from Detroit, Michigan. Thank you for being part of our family. Let me tell you everything. The lady at the front desk had a big book with names. Hello dear, I'm here for the Miller wedding. My name is Betty Johnson, I said with a smile. She looked down at her papers and frowned. I'm sorry ma'am, but I don't see your name anywhere. Before I could say anything, I heard a mean laugh behind me. Oh, that's right, we didn't put her on the list, said Sarah, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a shiny white dress and had a nasty smile on her face. Thanks for coming though, Betty. You look very colorful. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. But I'm Tommy's mother, I whispered. Sarah's smile got bigger and meaner. Yes, I know exactly who you are. But this is a small wedding. Only important people are invited. She looked at the desk lady and said, she's not supposed to be here. Maybe she got confused about which wedding this was. I stood there in my purple dress feeling so small. I had picked out this dress 3 weeks ago. It wasn't expensive, but it made me feel pretty. I had even put on the pearl necklace my husband gave me on our wedding day. I hadn't worn it since his funeral last year. And now I was being told to leave. My mouth felt dry like sand. I looked at Sarah again. There must be some mistake. Tommy invited me. Sarah tilted her head like a bird. Oh sweetie, I don't think so. Look, we only have room for 50 people. We can't have any surprise guests. Maybe you're thinking of a different wedding. My legs felt wobbly. Not because I'm old, but because I felt so embarrassed. I was being asked to leave my own son's wedding. The wedding I had helped pay for. Sarah knew exactly what she was doing. The desk lady looked uncomfortable now. She kept looking back and forth between us. Should I check the list again? She asked quietly. But Sarah leaned forward and said firmly, she's not expected. Let's not make this into a big problem. That's what she thought I was. Some old lady who would cry and make a scene. But I'm not like that. So I nodded once. I understand, I said. Then I turned around and walked away. I walked past the fancy doorman who looked confused. I went outside into the warm sunshine. It was a beautiful day in spring. The sun was shining bright and made all the expensive cars in the parking lot sparkle. My little blue Honda sat quietly between a big black car and a fancy red sports car. As I walked toward it, my chest hurt. Not from shame anymore. That feeling had gone away when Sarah smiled at me like that. Now I felt something else. Something quiet but strong. Anger, I think. A new kind that I had never felt before. I got in my car and sat still for a moment. My hands rested on the steering wheel, and my dress was smooth across my knees. That's when I really got mad. Slow and steady anger. My name wasn't on their list. But my money sure was. I had quietly given them over $50,000 for this wedding. I did it secretly, just like Sarah asked, so her rich family could look good. Let us take the credit, she had said. It will be better that way. I said yes because I thought it would help me stay close to my son. I thought if I was helpful and quiet, they would want me around. I believed that love meant giving up my place so others could shine. I believed that if I stayed in the background, I would still belong somehow. But as those hotel doors closed behind me, I realized something important had been erased. And this wasn't the first time. This wasn't the first time I had been left out. Not the first time Tommy didn't call me or visit. Not the first time I felt too simple or too plain for their fancy events. The difference was this time I had paid for everything. I had bought the stage, the food, the music, the flowers. And now they wanted me to sit outside like a dog while they enjoyed the party. No way. I started my car. The hotel got smaller in my mirror as I drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't curse them. That would have been too easy. I just drove away quietly. As I passed the flower shop where I had ordered all the roses for their tables, 12 tables of beautiful white and pink roses that Sarah loved, I pulled over and got out my phone. The banking app lit up on my screen. So did my email from the wedding planner. And right then my hands stopped shaking. My back got straight. My thoughts became clear like a bell ringing. They hadn't put my name on the guest list. But they were about to learn just how important that name really was. And this time there would be no confusion. I didn't go straight home. I needed to drive and think. I needed space between me and that fancy hotel where my name didn't matter. The town blurred by as I drove. The red brick shops, the people walking slowly, the coffee shop with a yellow sign where my husband and I used to go. Everything looked the same. Only I had changed. I stopped at a red light and saw the envelope on my passenger seat. Inside was a card I had written that morning. For your new life together with all my love, Mom. And a check for $5,000. Honeymoon money. Soft gift. I had put it in carefully, thinking it would be a sweet surprise. No big deal, no credit needed. Now it looks silly. I had prepared for a party they had already decided I couldn't attend. When I got to my house, the white cottage on Pine Street with a blue porch and the creaky step my husband never fixed, the sun was almost gone. I didn't turn on any lights. I sat on my bed with my feet on the old carpet and just listened to the quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful but tells you the truth. No one was going to call. No one was going to ask where I was. They had all the guests they wanted. I changed out of my purple dress slowly. I folded it nicely and put it over the chair. Then I walked barefoot to the kitchen and opened the drawer next to the sink. Inside were folders with papers and bills. I pulled out the one labeled Tommy's wedding. Yes, Tommy, my son. Not Thomas, not Tom, not the fancy name he uses now for work. He was Tommy when I first held him as a baby with chubby cheeks and my father's chin. He was Tommy when he held my hand walking to school. He was Tommy when I stayed up late fixing his torn clothes because he grew so fast I couldn't buy new ones. And now I was just his mother, someone who got in the way, someone not worth putting on a list. I opened the folder and looked at all the papers. Receipts, emails, contracts with the wedding people. Lists of everything we bought. The fancy hall rental, flowers, food for 60 people, a photographer, music, special invitations with gold writing. It all cost $53,600. All paid by me quietly through my bank account, just like Sarah asked. Except Tommy never asked. Sarah had done all the talking. Sweet and polite over coffee, explaining how it would be a gift that would mean everything to him. How he would never accept it if he knew. I believed her. I thought she was trying to help us get closer. I didn't see it then. How she made me sound like a problem, not a blessing. She had painted a picture of me that I barely knew. Someone easy to leave off lists. I stared at the bottom of one contract. Final payment due September 20th at 8 a.m. That was tomorrow morning, which meant there was still time. I picked up the phone and called my bank. First National Bank, this is Jenny, came the voice. Hello Jenny, this is Betty Johnson. I need to talk to my account manager, please. Pause, then cheerful sounds. Yes, Mrs. Johnson, one moment while I get him for you. Blick. Then a different voice, friendly and warm. Mrs. Johnson, it's Mike. What can I help you with today? Mike, I said calmly. I need you to stop all the payments for the Miller-Jackson wedding right now. Pause, then typing sounds. Ma'am, that includes several payments going out in the next few hours. The whole food band. Is something wrong? Yes, I said. What's wrong is that the people having this wedding made sure I wasn't invited. Silence. I'm so sorry to hear that, Mike said slowly. But these payments were already approved. Some might already be sent. Then stop whatever you can and put a hold on everything else. I'll pay any fees. I understand. Let me check what's still pending. I waited, looking at the small flower arrangement I had bought last week. It was dying now in a glass vase. White roses. Sarah had said they had to be white roses. Mike came back on the phone. We can stop the final hall payment and the band payment. The photographer's money already went through. So did the decorator's first payment. Everything else can be stopped before morning. Do it, I said. Yes, ma'am. I'll send you confirmation emails. Should we tell the companies? No, I said. I'll handle that myself. After I hung up, I sat quietly again. Not waiting to cry, not feeling sad. Something else was growing inside me. Calm, clear feeling. They wanted me to be invisible, but now being invisible would be their problem. I picked up the envelope again, the gift they didn't want me to give. I slid out the check and tore it in half, then in half again. The pieces fell on my kitchen floor like confetti. Then I picked up my phone and called the wedding planner. Elegant Events, this is Maria. Hello Maria, this is Betty Johnson. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, is everything okay? No, but I'm going to fix it. I need to cancel all services for the Miller-Jackson wedding right now. But that's tomorrow. She stopped talking, sounding worried. Mrs. Johnson, the hotel, the workers, that's dozens of people. Are you sure? They're not my problem anymore, I said. None of them are. By morning, the town was buzzing with news. I knew because Maria called back 3 times. First at 6 a.m., then again just before 8. Her voice got higher and more worried with each call. Mrs. Johnson, the hotel needs to know what's happening. They're saying they'll cancel everything unless someone pays them today. We have 60 guests coming tonight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say sorry. I already told you my decision, I said. The payments are stopped. The services won't happen. Let whoever was going to get the credit figure out how to pay the bills too. There was a long quiet moment where I could hear her breathing, trying to decide if she should argue or beg. Then she said quietly, I'll tell the couple. You do that, I said and hung up. I turned off my phone after that. I had said everything I needed to say. Outside, the air was warm and heavy. Summer was almost here, even though it was still spring. I stepped onto my porch and sat down slowly. My knees hurt in that familiar way. I looked at the quiet street. Same neighbors, same trees, same swing moving gently in the breeze. But I wasn't the same person. For years I had watched myself disappear bit by bit. An invitation that never came. Thank you that was never said. A story told like I hadn't been there, hadn't paid for it, hadn't loved through it all. I told myself it was just part of being a mother. The quiet giving up of things. Let them have the spotlight. Let them take the credit. My job was done. But what they did yesterday wasn't forgetting. It was throwing me away. It was cutting me out completely. And I was done pretending it didn't hurt. By noon, the first sign that word was getting out came with a knock on my door. I opened it and found my granddaughter Lisa standing there. Her hair was still done up from last night's rehearsal dinner. Her eyes were wide with something between fear and amazement. Grandma, she whispered. What did you do? I stepped aside to let her in. Come in, sweetheart. She dropped her purse by the door and turned to face me. She looked upset and scared. The wedding place is calling everyone. There's no party, no music. The hotel says the money was taken back. Dad is going crazy. Sarah is crying. Her parents are talking about calling lawyers. I held up my hand. Sit down, Lisa. She fell onto the couch like her legs had given out. You cancelled everything. I did. But why? I looked at her carefully. This girl, this bright light in our broken family. She had always seen me, visited me, asked how I was, remembered my birthday, held my hand at Grandpa's funeral. She deserved the truth. They didn't want me there, I said. Your father and Sarah made that very clear. Lisa's face turned red with anger. That's not. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I thought you were coming. I thought they knew I had paid for everything, I said gently. But they didn't want me in the room. They wanted my money, not me. Her voice cracked. That's horrible. No, sweetheart, I said, my voice getting softer. It's honest. For once, I can see things clearly. She wiped away tears and sat up straight. But what happens now? There's a whole wedding tonight. People flying in from far away, photographers, a band. What are they going to do? I imagine, I said, standing up slowly. They'll do what grown people do when life doesn't go the way they planned. They'll figure it out. And you, she asked. What are you going to do? I gave her a small smile. I'm going to put the money I saved for the wedding into an account for you. She looked shocked. Wait, what? He nodded. The money I set aside for the wedding, the honeymoon, the gifts. It's going somewhere it's wanted. Somewhere it matters. I want to help you with school, with your future. Whatever you need. She shook her head, tears starting again. Grandma, I didn't ask for. I know you didn't, I said, touching her cheek. That's exactly why it's yours. We sat quietly for a while. Lisa curled up in the corner of the couch. Me in the old chair by the window. Outside, a blue bird landed on the fence. The wind changed direction. Somewhere down the street, a child was laughing. Does he know, she asked finally, Dad, that you cancelled everything? I expect he does by now. And what about you paying for it all? I tilted my head. I imagine that part is just starting to hit him. Lisa rubbed her eyes. I wish I could see his face. Smiled. No need to wish. You'll hear all about it soon enough. Are you okay? She asked, her voice small and worried. I'm tired, I said honestly. But I'm not sorry. She stood up, walked over, and knelt at my feet like she used to when she was little and we played tea party. I love you, she said simply. I reached for her hands. I know, and I love you too. That's why I did this. We stayed like that for a long time. Old and young, connected not by guilt or pretending, but by truth. That evening, long after she had gone home, the doorbell rang again. This time I didn't answer right away. I already knew who it was. I waited until the second ring to get up. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted the silence to say something first. I walked to the front door slowly. My slippers made no sound on the wood floor. Through the peephole I saw exactly who I expected. Me. He wasn't wearing his fancy suit anymore. Just a wrinkled shirt and pants like he had thrown them on fast. His face looked tight and angry. Not worried, not guilty. Just mad. Tommy never showed his feelings first. He always tried to control everything. I opened the door but didn't ask him to come in. Mom, he said, breathing hard. We need to talk. I looked at him for a moment. My son, taller than his father was. Gray hair already showing even though he's still young. His eyes, his father's eyes, couldn't look at mine. So talk, I said, putting one hand on the doorframe. Can I come in? No. That surprised him. He blinked like he hadn't thought I might say that. Tommy was used to people letting him in. He looked behind him, then leaned closer. Sarah is having a breakdown. The hotel is threatening to sue us. The food people cancelled. Guests are showing up with nowhere to go. What the hell is going on? I crossed my arms. I cancelled the payments. I know that, he snapped. Why? I stared at him. Because I wasn't invited. He let out a big breath and rubbed his head. Jesus, Mum. Is this really about that? I tilted my head. You mean the part where your wife laughed at me and told the desk person I wasn't on the guest list? Or the part where you stood there and said nothing? That wasn't supposed to happen like that. But it did happen like that. And you let it happen. He looked away, moving his jaw like he was chewing something bitter. I watched him for a moment, then added, and yet somehow my money was invited to attend. Don't do that. Do what? Turn this into some kind of victim thing. You said you didn't want credit. You told us to keep it quiet. We thought. No, I interrupted. You didn't think at all. You used me. And when it was time to honor me, you erased me. That's not true, he said, but his voice was weak. You're making this bigger than it is. I nodded slowly. All right, let's make it smaller then. Tell me, when exactly did you decide I wasn't welcome? He flinched. That's what I thought, I said quietly. There was a long quiet moment between us. He shifted his weight, put his hands on his hips, then dropped them again. Sarah thought. He started, but I stopped him with my hand raised. Don't you dare blame this on your wife. I don't care if she whispered it or shouted it. You made the choice. You let it happen. You let me stand there like a fool, Tommy. He didn't answer. He couldn't. And I think maybe for just a moment he felt ashamed. So now what? He asked finally, his voice quieter. You've destroyed your own son's wedding out of spite? No, I said calmly. I've taken back my dignity. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I leaned against the doorframe. You've been borrowing pieces of me for years. My money, my help, my time, my forgiveness. And I gave it all freely because I believed you loved me. Even if you didn't show it well, even if you had changed. But yesterday, my voice got tight for the first time. Yesterday you told the world that I don't matter. And I heard you loud and clear. He swallowed hard. His voice got angry again. We can't afford to fix this ourselves. There are fees, contracts, people's opinions. And none of that was my concern until today, I said. You want the money, Tommy? Then you get me with it. That's the deal. It always was. You just didn't like the terms anymore. He was quiet. Then he said, so what? You're done with us now. After everything. I stared at him. What is everything exactly? 1,000 small hurts. 10 years of distance. You stopped being my son the day you decided I was embarrassing. His face changed. First anger, then desperation. Mom, please. No, I said, and this time my voice was steady. You don't get to call me that today. We stood like that for a long time. Two people with the same blood and not much else. Then I stepped back and started to close the door. He caught it with his hand. Please, he said quietly this time. What do I tell them? I looked him in the eyes. Tell them the truth. And I closed the door. This time he let it shut. The quiet after the door closed was different this time. It wasn't heavy with regret or worry. It was clean and cold, like a room that had finally gotten fresh air after years of being stuffy. I stood there for a moment with my hands still on the door handle, listening. He didn't knock again. He didn't yell. He just stood there for a minute, then walked away. I watched from the window as he walked down my front path. His shoulders were hunched and his steps were uneven. My Tommy, not the son I raised who used to run to me when he scraped his knee with tears and trust, but the man who had grown out of needing me and somehow grown into resenting me. That man walked down my path and didn't look back once. I sat back down at the kitchen table. The envelope, now empty, still sat near the edge. Next to it my tea from earlier, now cold. The roses I had bought for their party were starting to droop. Their stems bent like they were sad. How fitting. Then, like the universe had a sense of humor, my phone started ringing again. Sarah. Her name flashed on the screen, followed by a second ring, then a third. I let it buzz in my hand before answering. I wanted to hear what she would say. I wanted to hear what excuse she would make. I picked up but didn't speak first. Betty, she said, her voice already high and strained, trying to sound sweet. I think there's been a big misunderstanding. No, I said. There hasn't. I'm sorry if you felt unwelcome yesterday. That wasn't what we meant to do. You told the desk person I wasn't on the list. Well, the list was handled by the planner. There might have been a mix-up. You laughed, Sarah, I interrupted. You looked me in the eye and laughed. Another pause, shorter this time. Her next words were clipped and sharp. I thought you wanted to stay in the background. Tommy told me. I said I didn't want credit, I said. I never said I wanted to disappear. Her breath caught. Okay, I see you're upset and I get it really, but we're in a very bad situation right now. There are guests coming. The place is in chaos. The food people say they won't come unless they're paid right away. Then pay them, I said simply. She hesitated. We don't have that kind of money right away. Everything was set up under your account and now it's not, I said. Your event, your problem. Betty, she said, her voice getting sharp, the nice mask slipping. You can't just pull out at the last minute and expect everything to work out fine. You pulled me out of the guest list, I replied. I'm just returning the favor. Another silence. Then, look, let's just be adults about this. Maybe we both made some mistakes. We can find a way to fix it together. I'm not interested in fixing this, Sarah. Then what do you want? She asked, and I could finally hear the panic she was trying to hide. I want my son to understand that choices have results, I said quietly. I want you both to feel, just for a moment, what it's like to be invisible, unwanted, pushed aside. By ruining our wedding. I almost laughed. I didn't ruin anything. I just took back what was mine. You know this is going to hurt Tommy's reputation. His job, his partners, everyone's here tonight. You're embarrassing him. I think he managed that on his own, I said. She sighed through her teeth. I don't understand why you're doing this. No, I said, you don't. And that's exactly the problem. And I hung up. Felt like slamming a door, even though it was just touching a button. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was final. Later that afternoon I made a fresh cup of tea, hot this time, and sat on my back porch. The birds were out pecking at the feeder my husband had hung years ago. My knees still hurt. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be. But for the first time in years I sat up straight and tall. By 3 o'clock the text messages started coming. Lisa sent the first one. Grandma, they're trying to book a local restaurant. It's a mess. Sarah's dad is on the phone with a lawyer. Then a few minutes later, waiters walked out. Cake never showed up. Some guests are already leaving. I didn't text back. Not yet. At 4:30, a call came from a number I didn't know. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later there was a voicemail. I listened to it on speaker. It was Tommy again. His voice sounded like sandpaper. Mom, look. Sorry. I'm sorry about yesterday. About how everything happened. We didn't think you'd want to come. You said you didn't want attention. We thought it was better that way. I was trying to protect the moment. He paused like he was trying to decide whether to say more. I didn't want to embarrass you, but I guess I did anyway. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Can we please talk before tonight? He didn't say, I love you. He didn't say, come back. I deleted the message without saving it. Then I looked out at the trees again. The wind had picked up. The sky was starting to change colors. And I thought, good. Let them scramble. Let them taste what silence feels like when it's your turn to reach out and no one answers. By 5 o'clock, I could picture the hotel ballroom sitting empty and dark. The musicians, if they had even shown up, packing their instruments and leaving, annoyed. The servers putting away their pressed uniforms. The wedding planner walking around with her headset crooked, whispering frantic apologies into thin air. And the guests, dressed in their best clothes, standing around holding warm glasses of flat champagne, confused. No music, no food, no bride and groom. Just confusion, whispers, and the slow, visible falling apart of an event that was supposed to be perfect. I didn't smile. I didn't feel happy about it. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't sabotage. It was truth finally standing up for itself. The next knock came just before 6. Not Tommy. Not Sarah. Not Lisa. It was a young man in a suit with a clipboard, nervous and sweating even though the evening was cool. His tie was crooked and his voice stumbled over the words. Mrs. Johnson. He nodded. Hi, I'm Connor from Elegant Events. I was told to bring this to you. He held out a thick folder. It's a copy of your contract and all the receipts for the wedding services. Maria asked me to bring it personally and, to say she's sorry. She said she had no idea about the guest list situation. I didn't take the folder right away. I looked at his face. He looked barely 20, the kind of boy who still called his mother when he had problems. Completely out of his depth here. I'm not angry at your company, Connor, I said. I'm angry at my son. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, ma'am. Maria really didn't know. She said she thought you were some distant relative. I let out a dry laugh. That's generous of her. Tell her not to worry. He nodded and handed me the folder. She also asked if you'd be willing to talk to the hotel. The manager is demanding answers. They've got staff still there waiting to know what's happening. I raised an eyebrow. They're still holding the room. Technically, he said, shifting his feet nervously. It's reserved until midnight. But with no final payment, they can't serve food or staff it. They're threatening legal action, but Maria said if you confirm the cancellation directly, it might help. I glanced at the clock inside. 6:03 p.m., the time the ceremony was supposed to start. I'll make the call, I said. Thank you for bringing this. Connor hesitated at the edge of my porch. Mrs. Johnson, just between us, I've worked a lot of weddings. Some are fancy, some are sweet, but the minute I met Sarah, I kind of knew something was off. He paused, then added almost shyly, I hope you're okay. I smiled, not big but real. I am, dear. He nodded and left. Once inside, I opened the folder and looked at the neat printouts. All my bank transfers, my emails, even the flower arrangements Sarah had picked. Pages and pages of clean white paper with words like luxury elegance and sophisticated style. Not one mention of my name anywhere. I picked up my phone and called the hotel directly. A woman answered, sounding tired and annoyed. This is Margaret, event manager at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Who am I speaking with? Betty Johnson, I said. The original sponsor of the Miller-Jackson wedding. Her voice changed immediately. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, we've been trying to reach you all day. I'm calling to confirm that the remaining payments have been cancelled, I said. You are under no obligation to continue hosting the event. Please consider the reservation cancelled. We understand, she said, trying to stay professional. It's just that some guests are still arriving. We've told them the celebration has been postponed, but no one is giving us clear direction. Let me be clear then, I said. There is no longer a celebration. Not here. Not under my name. Another pause, then softer. May I ask if everything is all right? No, I said. But it will be. After I hung up, I poured myself another cup of tea and took it to the living room. The windows were open and I could hear the distant sounds of the city. Cars, laughter, the occasional horn. Somewhere out there, my son was facing the music he thought I would always pay for. My phone buzzed again. A message from Lisa. Grandma, I think you should know. The wedding guests just found out they didn't pay for anything. They're furious. Sarah's father is yelling at Tommy. People are leaving. Some of them know it was you who cancelled everything. I think they know it was you who paid for everything too. I didn't reply. What could I say? But let them know. They should have known all along. They should have looked me in the eye and said, Thank you, Betty. We're grateful. Please join us. Instead, they had slammed the door in my face and thought I would keep paying for the house they had locked me out of. Let them feel it now. The cold wind that rushes in when the foundation crumbles. Let them scramble. Let them explain. Let them sit in silence and wonder how it all fell apart. I finished my tea and turned off the lights in the living room. Tonight they could learn how it feels when absence is not an accident but a choice. The house was quiet but not heavy. Not the kind of quiet that creeps in after a fight or hangs around like smoke after disappointment. This was something else entirely. This was peace. I hadn't felt that kind of calm in years. By 7 o'clock I had stopped checking the time. The night was moving on without me, and I had no plans to chase after it. I sat at my kitchen table, my table in my home, and read the newspaper from front to back for the first time in months. I circled a recipe for vegetable soup, cut out a gardening tip. I even laughed out loud at a comic strip that my husband used to say was stupid. I had just stood up to wash my teacup when I heard another knock. It was slower this time, not rushed or demanding. I opened the door and saw Lisa standing there. She looked exhausted. Her shoes were in her hand, her hair was falling down, and her makeup was smudged under her eyes. But when she looked at me, something in her face softened. "Hi," she said simply. I stepped aside without a word and let her in. She sat down at the kitchen table like she had when she was little, legs crossed, resting her chin in her hands. I poured us both fresh water and set the glasses down. We sat in silence for a few moments. She didn't cry and I didn't push her to talk. Finally she spoke. "You should have seen their faces when the hotel manager told them the reservation was cancelled." I said nothing, just listened. Dad tried to lie about it. Said there was some computer error. Sarah blamed the wedding company, but people were asking questions. Someone, I don't know who, said they heard you were the real sponsor and that you pulled the plug. She looked up at me. "They're not wrong, are they?" I met her eyes. "No, they're not wrong." She gave a small, bitter laugh. Well, that's when Sarah's parents completely lost it. Her father started shouting, called Dad a liar, said he had embarrassed them in front of all their friends. Sarah was crying, saying the wedding was cursed. I raised an eyebrow. "Cursed?" She said that's what happens when certain people bring their bad energy around things that are supposed to be elegant. There it was. Even when her world was falling apart, her true voice came through. Lisa saw the flash of anger in my face and leaned forward. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I didn't know they were planning to do that to you. I didn't think." She stopped. "I didn't think they would go that far. You always hoped your father was better than that," I said gently. She nodded, looking sad. I took her hand in mine. "So did I, sweetheart." She swallowed hard. "Do you regret canceling everything?" I looked at her for a long moment, this girl who had always seen me clearly. "No," I said firmly. "Not for a single second." She let out a breath that seemed to carry relief and sadness mixed together. "They didn't just leave you out," she said. "They used you, then tried to pretend you were never part of it at all." "I let them," I said quietly. "For years, I wanted so badly to believe that if I gave enough, eventually I'd be invited back in." Lisa wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "What happens now?" I looked out the window. The stars had started to come out, one by one, then a whole scatter of tiny white dots above the rooftops. "Now," I said, "they'll have to figure out who they are without my money holding them up." She stared at me with wide eyes. "You really mean that, don't you?" "I do. All of it." Another pause, then quietly. "Grandma, would you come with me? Just for a drive. I don't want to go home yet." I hesitated. I hadn't planned to leave the house tonight, but something in her face, some mix of sadness and loyalty, made me nod. "All right," I said. "Let me get my shoes." We drove through town with the windows down. The air was warm and the streets were mostly empty now. We didn't talk for a while. I watched the city I had never left, the town that had held every version of me. The girl, the wife, the widow, the mother, and now maybe something new. Lisa pulled into the parking lot behind a small hill with a view, the kind of place with a rusty fence and a single wooden bench where teenagers made promises they wouldn't keep and old people came to watch the sunset. We got out and walked to the edge. Below us, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars. Somewhere down there, my son was pacing in a rented tuxedo, trying to save a night that had been built on lies. "I keep thinking about how you must have felt," Lisa said, her voice quiet in the darkness. "Standing there at that desk." "It wasn't the first time," I said, still looking out over the lights. She turned to look at me. "They've been closing doors on me for years. This was just the first time they did it where everyone could see." Lisa took a shaky breath. "I'll never understand how they could do that to you." "They don't need me," I said simply. "They need what I give, but that's over now." She was quiet for a long time, then almost whispered, "I'm glad you said no." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman she was becoming. Honest, sharp, able to see the whole truth, not just the pretty version. "Me too," I said. We sat there until the stars outnumbered the streetlights, until my knees started to get stiff and the night got cooler. Then we drove home and I didn't feel alone anymore. By the next morning I had received 8 more calls. 3 from Tommy, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Sarah's mother, and 3 from the wedding company, though the last one came in at almost midnight, long after I had turned off the ringer and gone to bed with a book. I didn't answer any of them. I slept well, better than I had in years. I didn't dream about apologies or making up. I didn't hope for a message saying they had changed their minds. I simply rested. When I woke up, the house felt different, like the walls had finally stopped holding their breath. I made coffee, scrambled 2 eggs, and ate them slowly by the window. My newspaper was still folded neatly on the table. A breeze came in through the screen door. The roses on the counter had started to turn brown at the edges, not dramatically, just quietly fading the way things do when they've served their purpose. At 9:30, the doorbell rang again. I opened the door to find Tommy standing there, but he looked different this time. Not panicked, not frantic, just tired. He had dark circles under his eyes and hadn't shaved. His tie was gone and the first button of his shirt was undone. He looked like a man who had stopped pretending he could fix everything with charm. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside without saying anything. He walked into the living room and stood for a moment like he didn't know where to start. Then he sat down, not on the couch, but in the old chair across from mine. Dad's chair. I didn't comment on it. "I don't know what to say," he finally said. "Then don't say anything," I replied calmly. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Everything's ruined." I nodded once, not to agree, just to show I had heard him. The guests were confused and angry. Half of them left before we could even gather everyone together. Sarah's parents. "Well, I don't think they'll be speaking to us for months." I sipped my coffee and waited. He looked up at me with tired eyes. "You really don't care, do you?" I met his gaze steadily. "That's not true. Care very much. Just not about what you think I should care about." He slumped back in the chair like all the air had gone out of him. "I didn't think it would end up like this." "No," I said. "You thought I'd swallow it like I always have." His face twisted with something that might have been shame. "That's not fair." "But it's true," I said. He didn't deny it this time. "I kept trying to explain to Sarah that you were fine with staying behind the scenes, that you wanted it that way. She thought it would be cleaner if we didn't make a big deal about it." I leaned forward slightly. "And did you think it would be cleaner to have your mother turned away at the door? Did you think I wouldn't want to come at all?" "I didn't know you'd want to," he said, and for once there was no anger in his voice, just confusion. "You never said anything." "Because I didn't think I had to," I said. He looked away, staring at the floor. "I'm not one for big speeches, Tommy," I continued. "But I spent my whole life showing up for you. For everything. School plays, birthdays, when your first marriage fell apart, when you were short on money for your house, when you needed someone to help with Lisa's school fees. I showed up, always." "I know," he said quietly. "No, you don't," I said firmly. "Because if you knew, you would have realized that showing up for your wedding wasn't some strange surprise. It was the most natural thing in the world." He nodded slowly, and I could see something breaking behind his eyes. "You're right." That surprised me more than anything else he could have said. "I was proud," he said, his voice getting quieter, "that I had pulled it all together, that Sarah's family saw me as successful, that everything looked perfect. I didn't want them to see where I came from." I took a deep breath. "Which means," I said carefully, "you didn't want them to see me." He swallowed hard and nodded. "I wasn't ashamed of you," he whispered. "Then why didn't you fight for me?" He looked down at his hands and didn't answer. We sat in that heavy silence for what felt like a very long time. Finally, I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured a second cup of coffee and set it in front of him on the small table. He stared at it like he wasn't sure it was real. "I'm not angry anymore, Tommy," I said, sitting back down. "But I'm finished giving parts of myself to people who don't value all of me." He nodded, his fingers wrapping around the warm cup. "I want to fix this," he said, looking up at me with something that might have been hope. "You can't," I said simply. He looked up sharply, but I continued before he could speak. But you can learn from it. That's the only apology I'll accept. He blinked, processing my words. I cancelled the wedding because you erased me, I said. I'm not interested in guilt or big gestures or promises. I just want you to understand that this, I pointed to myself, to my home, is not a resource you can use anymore. He sat back in the chair, speechless for a moment. I set up a trust account, I continued, for Lisa. The money I had saved for your wedding, the honeymoon, all the gifts I was planning to give you. It's all going to her now. She's the only one who has ever made me feel seen and valued. I understand, he said, barely above a whisper. I doubt that, I said honestly. But maybe someday you will. He stood up slowly, leaving the coffee untouched on the table. I should go, he said. I didn't try to stop him. As he reached the door, he paused with his hand on the handle. Mom, he said, and his voice was small, like when he was little. I miss how things used to be between us. I looked at him evenly, seeing both the man he had become and the boy he used to be. Then maybe you shouldn't have changed them, I said quietly. And I closed the door behind him, gently, without anger or regret. The days that followed moved slowly, like the air after a thunderstorm, thick but clear. No more calls came from Tommy. Not a text, not a visit, not even a letter. And I didn't expect any. Not because he was cruel, but because silence had always been his way of dealing with problems. As a boy, when he got caught in a lie or hurt someone's feelings, he would go quiet for days, thinking that time would magically erase the damage. As a man, it had become his habit. Silence as strategy, as protection. But I no longer sat around waiting for it to end. Instead, I returned to my own rhythm. I planted marigolds in the front garden. I painted the back gate white. I took soup to my neighbor Helen when I heard her coughing through the thin walls. Simple things. My things. And in the quiet, something wonderful happened. I began to hear myself again. I remembered the sound of my own footsteps in the hallway when the house was still full of family. I remembered the voice I used to speak to my husband in the dark, back when we didn't worry about who needed what and when and how much money was left in the bank. I remembered the sharp snap of clean sheets on the line and the way Tommy used to giggle when I pressed them against his cheek and said they were sun-warmed. I remembered being a woman, not just a mother. One morning I found myself pulling out an old photo album, not out of sadness but curiosity. I wanted to see what had been real, what I might have missed while trying to hold everything together. The pictures were all there. Birthdays with homemade cakes, tiny shoes lined up by the door, camping trips, Easter dresses, report cards taped to the refrigerator. I had documented it all like it might someday prove something, that I had been present, that I had loved well. But what struck me most wasn't what I had recorded. It was what I hadn't. There were no photos of me crying in the hospital after my husband died. No picture of the check I wrote to save Tommy's business in 2015. No record of the year I canceled my own doctor visits to help pay for Lisa's college applications. Those moments, the ones that cost me the most, had passed like shadows. And maybe that's what hurt more than the wedding. Not that I hadn't been seen, but that I had made peace with being invisible. Till now. The knock that came the following Friday was soft and careful. I opened the door expecting maybe a delivery or Helen returning my soup bowl. But it was Lisa. She was holding a brown envelope and looked nervous. "Hi," she said. "Can I come in?" "Always," I said, stepping aside. She came inside and sat at the kitchen table without needing to be asked. She wore jeans and a loose sweater. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. She looked more like herself than she had in weeks. "I have something," she said, setting the envelope in front of me. "A letter from Dad." I didn't reach for it immediately. She watched my face carefully. "He asked me to bring it to you. He said he didn't think you'd open it if it came in the mail." "He's probably right," I said. She nodded. "I haven't read it, but he told me he wrote it by hand." That surprised me. Surprised me too. Tommy hadn't handwritten anything since high school. I looked at the envelope for a long moment, then slid it toward me and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 pages, folded once. Plain white paper. No fancy letterhead, no typed words, just his handwriting. Slightly shaky, but definitely his. I read it silently while Lisa waited patiently. "Mom, I don't deserve for you to read this, but I need to write it anyway. I've been thinking about everything. Not just the wedding but all of it. The years of help, the things you gave without asking for anything back. The times I should have said thank you and didn't. The times I made you feel small when you were the one holding our family together. You were right about everything. I wanted the image more than the truth. I wanted to look like a man who had built something on his own. I wanted Sarah's family to see me as someone who had made it. And I thought if I just kept you in the background it would be cleaner. That's the word that keeps echoing in my head. Cleaner. But now I see what I really did. I erased you. I watched them turn you away at that door. I heard every word. I saw the look on your face. And I did nothing to stop it. I don't know how to live with that knowledge. I can't ask you to forgive me because I'm not sure I'd believe you if you said you did. But I want you to know that I see it all now, clearly. See you. And I'm sorry. More sorry than I've ever been about anything in my life. Tommy. When I finished reading, I folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry, didn't smile. I just sat there and breathed. Lisa watched me carefully, searching my face for clues. "Well," she asked softly. "He's trying," I said finally. "That's something at least." She looked relieved. "You're not going to throw it away." "No," I said. "But I'm not going to frame it either." We sat quietly for a while. I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope, feeling the weight of the paper, the ink, the time it must have taken him to write each word. It didn't erase what had been done, but it named it clearly. And sometimes that's the first step toward healing. Not forgiveness, not going back to how things were. Just the truth spoken plainly for once. 4 days passed before I heard from Sarah. I hadn't expected her to show up in person. I assumed, if anything, she would send an email or maybe just disappear entirely. But instead it was a simple text message. Just 4 words. "Can we please talk?" No punctuation, no explanation, no apology. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I had nothing left to give away for free. I had already spent years handing over my time, my patience, my silence. I wasn't going to hand over my attention too. Not without a very good reason. The next day, a delivery truck brought a small box to my door. No return address. Just my name written on a white envelope taped to the top. Inside the box were leftover wedding items. The ruined party favors. A pair of champagne glasses with T&S carved in fancy letters. A silver picture frame still in its wrapper. The kind of box someone packs when they don't know what to say but feel like they should say something. I didn't open the card right away. Instead, I stood there looking at those delicate glasses, so fragile and formal, clearly meant for display, and wondered what Sarah thought this gesture might accomplish. Eventually, I opened the envelope and read her note. "Betty, I don't expect you to respond to this. I just want you to know that I see now what I didn't see before. I saw your name on every single receipt when the planners sent us the final paperwork. Every flower, every fork, every inch of that room had your fingerprints on it. I thought I could separate the celebration from the source. I thought money was just money, neutral. It wasn't. You weren't. I wanted something perfect and flawless. I wanted a story to tell my family, my friends, my co-workers. One where everything looked elegant and earned. But I didn't want to include the woman who made it all possible because I couldn't control how she fit into that perfect version. I can see now how shameful that was. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just didn't want my silence to be the last thing you heard from me. Sarah." The handwriting was neat and careful, too controlled to be truly sincere, but not cold either. I placed the letter back in its envelope, then slid it into the same drawer where I kept Tommy's letter. Not as keepsakes, not for sentiment, just to remind myself that recognition, when it finally comes, often arrives too late to change anything. Later that evening, I stood at the kitchen sink peeling apples for a pie. Not for anyone in particular, just because it felt like a good day for baking. The smell of cinnamon and butter filled my house, and the silence around me didn't feel empty anymore. Felt earned, honest. I thought about the wedding they had wanted, perfect, polished, expensive, and how quickly it had all collapsed once the truth stopped supporting their lies. That's the part they never understood. I wasn't the obstacle to their happiness. I was the foundation. And now that I had stepped away from beneath them, they were learning how little their fancy structure could actually hold on its own. The pie had cooled by morning. I wrapped 2 slices in wax paper and set them aside for Helen. She liked them with her afternoon tea. The rest I stored carefully in the old ceramic dish my husband once jokingly called the inheritance nobody would fight over. He was right about that. No one had ever asked about it, wanted it, or even noticed it. The quiet in my house that day felt different from before. Not the heavy weight of loneliness, but the comfortable lightness of distance. The kind of silence that comes after you've finally said what needed to be said. It was an honest stillness, and I liked it. Around noon, Lisa called. "Do you want to get out of the house today?" she asked. "Just a drive, maybe lunch somewhere nice." "I'd like that very much," I said. We didn't go far. Just the little diner off Highway 9, the one with the blue vinyl booths and the jukebox that hadn't worked in 20 years. It wasn't elegant or fancy, but it was ours. Familiar and comfortable. We sat by the window and ordered simple food. I had a tuna sandwich on wheat bread. She had grilled cheese and tomato soup. She sipped her lemonade and looked at me across the table. "I told Dad about the trust fund," she said quietly. I met her eyes. How did he take the news? She stirred her drink with the red plastic straw. Quietly. I think he expected it, honestly. He didn't argue or try to change your mind. "Good," I said simply. She hesitated for a moment. "He wants to try again to fix things between you two." I nodded slowly, cutting my sandwich in half. "Trying is fine, but it's not a promise of anything." She seemed relieved by my answer. I told him exactly that. We ate our lunch in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet where nothing needs to be filled with words. After we finished eating, we stopped by the park and just walked. No destination in mind, no hurry. The trees were beginning to lose their leaves early for autumn. But the breeze was gentle and the sky was the kind of gray that made all the green things seem brighter and more alive. Lisa slipped her arm through mine as we walked slowly along the path. "You know, everyone talks about starting over like it's this big dramatic thing," she said thoughtfully. "But I think it's actually smaller and quieter than that." I looked at her and smiled. "It is," I agreed. She squeezed my arm gently. "I'm proud of you, Grandma. What you did took courage." The words caught me off guard in the best way. "You did something brave," she continued. "Not loud or mean, just brave. You stood up for yourself." I looked at this girl who had grown into someone I trusted more than most adults I knew. Someone who saw clearly and spoke honestly. I squeezed her hand back. "So did you, sweetheart." "Me?" she asked, surprised. "How?" "By coming back home. By choosing truth over comfort." We walked the rest of the way in peaceful silence. 2 generations connected not by obligation or guilt, but by genuine love and respect. The house welcomed me back like an old friend. I put the kettle on for tea, folded the clean laundry, and refilled the bird feeder outside my kitchen window. Nothing special or dramatic, just the small tasks that make a house feel like a home. All of it mine, chosen freely. The next day, I received something unexpected in the mail. Not a card or letter, but a photograph. No return address, no message written on the envelope, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a picture I had never seen before, taken from somewhere in the crowd at the wedding rehearsal a few nights before everything fell apart. In the photo, Tommy was standing near the practice altar, his tie slightly crooked, looking down at a piece of paper with his lines written on it. Behind him, slightly out of focus, Sarah stood adjusting the practice veil she had worn. On the back, in tiny careful writing, someone had written, "There was always a place for you. We just didn't know how to honor it properly." No signature, no name. I stared at the photograph for a long while, holding it carefully by the edges. Place for me, yes, but not a seat with my name on it. Not a hand extended in welcome. Not an introduction as the woman who had made it all possible. Just a vague space somewhere behind the curtain, a presence felt but not acknowledged. I placed the photo on my kitchen counter, not in a frame, not displayed prominently, just there as a reminder. They had wanted the version of me that didn't speak up, didn't ask questions, didn't need recognition. But that version of me no longer existed. And this version, the one who knew her own worth, was just beginning to understand what she was capable of. The following Sunday, I went to church for the first time in almost 3 years. Not out of habit or obligation. I hadn't been since my husband's funeral, but because I wanted to sit somewhere peaceful where no one expected anything from me. Not money, not answers, not forgiveness, just my presence. The sanctuary was about half full. A few faces I recognized, some older than I remembered, others softened by time and experience. I sat in the back row, near the stained glass window with a small chip in the corner that my husband always used to point out when he thought no one was looking. The sermon was about humility, about how grace isn't something given to the loudest voices, but found by those who learn to be still and listen. I didn't close my eyes and pray, but I listened carefully. And when the choir stood to sing a hymn I hadn't heard since Tommy was in Sunday school, I let the familiar melody carry me somewhere peaceful. Not backward to what used to be, not forward to what might happen, just here to this moment, present and awake. After the service ended, an older woman I only vaguely remembered approached me in the lobby. I think her name was Dorothy. "You look different," she said without any small talk or politeness. "Better. Lighter somehow." I smiled at her directness. "I've stopped carrying things that don't belong to me," I said simply. She blinked once, then nodded slowly with understanding. "Good for you, dear. That's the hardest lesson to learn." That was all. No gossip, no questions. Just a shared moment of recognition between two women who had lived long enough to understand. Outside the church, the sun had broken through the morning clouds. I stood on the stone steps and felt the warmth on my shoulders and face. For just a brief moment, I thought about calling Tommy. Not to fix anything or make demands, just to say that I had heard something beautiful today and hadn't thought of him with anger. But I didn't make the call. Some silences are better left undisturbed, and some peace is too fragile to risk. That afternoon, I returned home to find a small package waiting on my front porch. No return address or delivery slip. Inside was a handmade photo album, covered in simple cream-colored fabric. The first page had a single line written in Tommy's careful handwriting. She was there for everything that mattered. And then, page after page of photographs I hadn't seen in years. Me holding him on his first day of kindergarten, both of us trying not to cry. Me in the audience at his high school graduation, clapping proudly. Me at the kitchen table helping him with homework by lamplight. Me beside his hospital bed when he broke his leg playing football, reading him stories. Me with baby Lisa on my hip, showing her how to feed the ducks at the pond. Me and my husband on our last anniversary. His hand over mine, both of us smiling at something just out of frame. No captions under the pictures, no explanations needed. Just images, evidence of a life lived with love and purpose. It wasn't an apology exactly, and it wasn't asking for forgiveness. It was simply an acknowledgement. By the time I reached the last page, I realized my hands were trembling slightly. I closed the album and held it against my chest for a moment. Then I stood up, walked to the bookshelf in my hallway, and made a space for it right in the middle, between the books that had taught me about the world and the ones I hadn't read yet. It didn't erase what had happened or change the choices that had been made. But it gave me something I hadn't expected to receive. Proof that I had been seen, not just in my pain and disappointment, but in my presence, in my love, in all the ways I had shown up when it mattered. A week later, autumn settled in with less drama than usual. No sudden storms or early snow, just a gentle cooling and the slow, beautiful surrender of leaves. I bought a new dress. Nothing flashy, just something well-made that fit the woman I was becoming. And for the first time in years I felt truly awake, truly present, truly myself.